Lisa from Annette Sheep Yarns, and today is episode 1 of our new podcast. So, let me take care of some house cleaning first thing out of the gate. I'm going to be podcasting every 2 weeks. So, we're kicking off on the 27th of July. So, uh, you can expect to see another podcast 2 weeks after that on Mondays. Now, I haven't gotten it down to a science yet, so I can tell you, by 12 o'clock on Monday, there'll be a new podcast, but we'll work towards that. So, what are we going to talk about? I'm going to talk about my knitting, a little bit of crochet, and anything else fibery that I get interested in. And what you'll learn about me is I'm curious about a lot of things, so lots of stuff is coming up. As you can see, I'm in my shop today. Sometimes I'll be filming from home, sometimes I'll be in the shop. Behind me is the start of our kits area. I'll be talking about that over time as we grow our kits in stock. What am I working on right now? It's a cute little scarf called Oh Helen. Funny story. I was working on this scarf. Oh, nuts. I think it fell off the needles. Okay, well, here we go. My first little minor disaster. This is being done in Three Bunny Designs yarn, and the colorway is Bunny's Got a Blue Jeans On, which I think is adorable. So before I completely lose my stitches, let me just grab what I can onto a needle, because of course I'm going to start out with a project misbehaving. Well, that's going to be par for the course, because I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of my knitting. So when projects go right, you'll hear all about it, and when they go wrong, I'll also be talking about how they went wrong and what I did to fix them, warts and all. Okay, so there we go. My stitches are caught. I will count them later just to make sure I have the right number, and I will link to Oh Helen, which is actually a free pattern, in the description bar down below. Look at that. One of the things I liked about it was that it's actually very, very simple knitting. It's a 2-row repeat, so you will memorize it, and as long as you keep to the number of stitches you're supposed to have, it's just everything's gonna fall into place. Look at that. I'll take some pictures of it too, to give you a good view of the mesh. It's a simple mesh stitch, and this yarn has been really fun to work in. One of my favorite things about this, that I will have to take a picture so you can see, is that the designer, the dyer who created this yarn, she's actually local to me in New Jersey, included these little bright pops of turquoise that I just love. It makes the yarn almost seem to sparkle. Like I said, I don't think you'll be able to see it on camera with those little bright pops. Oh yeah, actually I think you can. I just love that sparkly look. One of the things that comes up often at the shop is, how do I use up those beautiful skeins I bought? Patterns like that can go for one skein, like Oh Helen, wonderful for that, because it uses up the entire skein. Because once you start Oh Helen, you can go as long as you want, or till you have just enough yarn to work your last row and bind off, and you're golden. You're good to go. Another type of knitting I want to do this summer is not so much knitting a whole garment necessarily, but upcycling garments I already have by adding some knitting to them. I have this t-shirt that I just love. What I liked about it was that it was a typical striped t-shirt, but it also had this lace trim along the cuffs and around the entire hem. Now, although the t-shirt has held up, the lace was made of the most flimsy material they could find. And it's really worn out. And I really like the shirt. I wear it all the time. So what I'm planning to do is to just make some new lace out of linen. This is Lino by BC Garn. It's going to be a lovely, lovely lace, and it will be washable like the rest of the shirt, washable and dryable. I've already wound my yarn into a cake because I haven't started swatching this yet. I might not, you know what? I might not even swatch it. It's just going to be an edging. Don't tell anybody I didn't swatch. I preach about swatching all the time at the shop. This is just between us. So Lino is 100% linen by BC Garn. And what you're getting is 150 meters to 50 grams. And they recommend that you do somewhere between a US 3 and a US 6. So I haven't done the meter translation. I'll do that and put it in the purl underneath. I will probably be working at a gauge closer to the 6 than the 3 because it doesn't need to be tiny, tiny, tiny lace. It's actually going to be a heavier lace, but because my lace is going to be heavier because my yarn is heavier, I'm not going to do as wide a band of lace on here. I'm just going to do a fairly narrow band of lace edging. And the way they sewed it on, they just sewed it directly to the fabric. I'm going to sew it on exactly the same way when I'm done with it. See, it's just a flap of lace hanging over the fabric. Fine by me. I can just run that through my sewing machine. So I got out my Japanese knitting pattern books because I became obsessed with them. I have 3 actually. This is Japanese Stitches Unravelled. The 250 Japanese knitting stitches. This is the original Stitch Bible by Hitomi Shida. Is that how you say her name? It might be Shahida. I'll look it up and find out how you say her name. And her second book that came out in English, the Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible. Now, one of the things I just adore about this is that the patterns are divided up by function. So when I wanted to look at edgings, I just went to the edging section and Shazam, beautiful edgings that I could just pick and choose from. I'm leaning towards something along maybe this line, but I don't know. I'm gonna say the dreaded S word and I'm gonna swatch and see what I like the look of the best. And I'm gonna actually go through my books a little bit more carefully and see what the winner ends up being. If I don't have a winner picked by the time I finish actually filming this stuff, I'll put it up on Instagram so you can see which one I actually went with. Ta-da! Costume change. I'm filming the podcast in bits and bobs as I get a chance to do it while I'm at the shop. So, hi, different outfit. It's okay. I wanted to talk about this kind of cool little app I found. It's called Palette Cam. It's a free app in the Apple App Store for the iPhones. I really, really like it. The only thing I use it for is putting together color palettes. But the neat thing is you can just take a picture of whatever it is you would like to pull colors from. And let me see if I can find it right quick. maybe this was the kind of thing I could have pulled up ahead of time. Okay, I see that now. Mistakes were made. But here we go. I just want to look at the picture. Here we go. So what I did was I took one of my, wait, decorating magazines. And you know what? I'm going to stop doing this nonsense and just drop a picture of this item in here into the film, because this isn't like impossible to see. But what it does, it allows you to import any picture you have on your phone or a picture that you just take and pull colors out of it. And if you use something like a photo you've taken while you were out, or in my case, I pulled a picture from a decorating magazine that I like to read. My feeling is a professional decorator put this room together. The colors are going to look pretty good together. So how this particular app works, instead of it just sucking some of the colors or whatever the prominent colors are out of the picture, it puts a dot on the picture and you move that dot around to pull colors out of whatever picture you want. So it actually gives you very fine control over what colors appear in your palette. And if you're like super into the colors, it even gives you the hex codes that you see, but most of us won't need that. Just having the palette along the bottom related right to the picture, and you can also look at the palette separately if you want to, but I kind of like this look. So I can take this with me when I'm shopping, or I can have it next to me when I'm shopping online, and I already know what colors are going to go together in my project. And I'm even getting a clue from how they're used in the picture. So, I won't necessarily use them all in the same proportion. In this particular picture, there was a mustardy gold that is just using an accent. And I might go with that and use it as an accent in my project. So on any phone system, they're going to have apps like this. It's a color palette generator app. That's what you're looking for. So give it a try and see if that takes some of the angst out of putting your colors together. So you can do it a little bit more confidently. And this part is fun because you can use any picture you like or any picture you take and really create personalized color palettes. Maybe you took a beautiful picture of a sunset on a particular day of your vacation. You could capture those colors in a project that you make, whether you're knitting or crocheting or what have you. Hey, costume change again. I told you guys I'm going to be filming this catch as catch can. So I have a few minutes this morning. And here we go. So I wanted to talk about a kind of hot topic that's going on right now in yarn world. Yarn substitution. Basically, there is concern and upset, really, that a lot of patterns are shown in hand-dyed yarns, and hand-dyed yarn is expensive. Hand-dyed yarn should be expensive because people are manually making it. So that it is what it is. Now, within that, there are some real things that people can learn in order to choose whatever yarn they're going to choose that's within their budget, that's still going to be appropriate for the pattern that they've chosen to work in. I think where you have to start with is with the pattern. Not just the picture. The person is going to take the best picture they can or get the best picture they can to represent the finished object. And it's going to be in whatever yarn they used. Now, a lot of times designers get contracted to design a pattern specifically for a particular yarn, and they're not going to recommend any other yarn for that because it's part of a contract they signed. So, what information you get in just about every well-written pattern, though, is the name of the yarn that was used, the yarn, the yardage in each skein of that yarn, the weight of that yarn, and the category of that yarn. And I'm separating weight and category. By category, I would mean fingering, DK, worsted, what have you. And by weight, I'm actually meaning the physical mass of the skein. Your typical skein is about 100 grams or 3.5 ounces. And the next number you'll see, usually with a slash in between, is the amount of yards contained in that many grams or ounces. So a typical skein of fingering weight yarn that's 100 grams is going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 yards. I've seen skeins where it was 387 yards to 100 grams, and I've seen skeins where it was nearly 500 yards, or let's say 497 yards to 400 grams. Excuse me, to 100 grams. So there's a lot of variance in there because the categories of the yarn, and they're usually in the United States, there is a chart you can get from the Yarn Council that describes the numbering system. So there's categories 1 through 7, I think. Actually, no, I think it's 0 through 7. 0 would be laced weight. All the yarns numbered 1 would be fingering, 2s are sports, 3s are DKs, and so on. I'll include a link to the chart in a down bar. But within each category, there's quite a large variance. In the shop, I will often take out 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn and show the customer, hey, you see how thin this particular fingering weight yarn is? While this other one looks positively burly next to it. So the categories are a range, and the measurement of that range is microns. I don't remember how many microns, from what number of microns to what number of microns makes a fingering weight yarn, but that's also available on the internet. You can look that up. So because it's a range, even within a category, you really have to pay attention to the actual weight and yardage. That's going to give you what I call the quick and dirty guide to yarn substitution. Oh, and the fiber content. So at minimum, in any pattern you want to use, you want to see what yarn they use, including the name of the yarn, the yardage, and the actual weight, the mass of the skein. You want to see what fiber or combination of fibers it was made of. If that's not included in your pattern, bypass that pattern. There are 10 million patterns out there. Don't waste your time on one that's not properly written. So, to get to yarn substitution. Now this is just a quick and dirty method. We do offer a class if you want to really delve into yarn substitution. But, so here you are, just a happy-go-lucky knitter or crocheter. You see a pattern, you fell in love with it, and it said it called for fingering weight yarn. And you're like, oh, I have fingering weight yarn in my stash. Let me just go see what I got. And you come up with this skein right here of Three Bunnies Designs Plumtastic. This is a local dyer to me. Lovely, lovely lady. Beautiful yarn. Check her out. I'll include a link to her shop in the down bar. Now, on this ball band, it says this is hand-dyed yarn. It's an 80-20 superwash merino and nylon fingering. Approximately 100 grams. And in that 100 grams, you have 400 yards. This is Red Heart. It's a wrap. This is would also be labeled number 1. So it's fingering weight. But it's cotton. Let me see. And I know I'm doing the the thing because I don't have my reading glasses nearby. So give me 1 minute. And they always hide it on the ball band. Oh, here it is. It's a 50/50 cotton and acrylic. It's labeled a number 1, and there are, I don't know how many yards in this puppy. Oh, actually it's a 200 gram skein, and it's 1,100 yards. Okay, so if you want to substitute these yarns, unless you're going to be changing the look and feel of the project, because you're free to do that too, you can decide, I want to make a shawl, but I want it to be for summery weather. You know, I just want something to put around me when the air conditioning is just a bit too much, but I don't need wool for the summer. You are completely free to change from wool to cotton. Just understand that it's not going to look the same, it's not going to act the same, it's not going to be the same. It'll be the same shape, but the fabric you make is going to have different characteristics. So, assuming that you want to make the thing very similar to the one in the picture, I would not switch from wool to cotton. The first thing I would do is match the fiber. If it is wool, whether it's merino wool or some other sort of wool, at least go with wool. Then I would try to match the weight that they told me the yarn was. So if I was looking for a fingering weight yarn that has some wool content, because you could do a wool and acrylic blend, that might work. I would then look for something that comes in 100 grams to 400 yards weight. Something close to that. I mean, even if it's not literally another yarn that says, okay, there's 100 grams of yarn in this skein and it's exactly 400 yards. If it's 410 yards, you're still okay. If it's 390 yards, you're still fine. You're still in the same ballpark. So I would look for those things first. So what's the difference, aside from the fiber content of this yarn, what's the difference between these two yarns? This yarn is actually much finer than this yarn, because in 200 grams you have over 1,000 yards. So in order to make up the 200 grams in this ball, they had to add way more yard to it. So if I were going to substitute this yarn, a yarn like this, I would look for a yarn that had approximately 400 yards to 100 grams, regardless of the brand. This is perfectly good yarn. This is perfectly good yarn. But you want to make sure they're comparable. Okay, so that's your quick and dirty guide for when you're in the store. So, or when you're going through your stash. Now, if it's a situation where you're going through your stash, you can also take out a little bit of yarn and swatch it. Or even better, you don't even have to swatch it yet. Swatching is like next level. So we're still in the place where we're not swatching yet. You can look up the gauge for the yarn and see if it gauges out comparably. Okay, so what I would do is I would look, usually on the ball band they will tell you, yes, and I do on here, if you get 30, if you have 30 stitches, and I'm going to talk in knit terms because I primarily knit, but it's the same process for crocheters. Matter of fact, on here there's a knit gauge and a crochet gauge. So according to the ball band on this yarn, if you use a US 2 and cast on 30 stitches and knit stockinette for 40 rows, you would come out with a 4-inch square. If the yarn you're trying to match is way off that, you could probably make it work, but that would take swatching. If you don't want to swatch, what you need to do is look for a yarn that gauges out somewhere in this territory, 30 stitches to 40 rows. Now, let's say the ball band on the yarn you're trying to match to the original yarn, it doesn't say 30 stitches to 40 rows. What I would do is I would look for it in terms of stitches per inch rather than the total for the 4 inches. So if this gauges out to, I don't know, 6.5 stitches per inch, I would look at the gauge on the yarn I'm trying to match and see if I can get it to 6.5 inches per stitch. If that works out, those yarns are pretty much comparable. But you would have to do the math on that. Now, so that's the actual substitution of the yarns. What about yardage? Let's say you have a pattern where they use, and I'm going to use easy numbers because math not so good. They use a total of 1,000 yards, right, of the hand-dyed yarn. And oh yes, they tell you it's 2 colors and they use 1 skein of each. So let's call it 800 yards because they usually come in 400 yard skeins. They use 2 colors and they use 1 skein of each yarn. So that's a total of 800 yards. And they tell you that there's 2 or 3 different sizes that still are, they only call for 2 skeins, 1 of each color. Then what they're telling you is you won't necessarily need a whole skein of any one color, regardless of which size of this, whatever the object is that you're making. But no one has sat down and figured out exactly how many yards you need to make size 1, size 2, or size 3. But the consensus is you're going to have enough yarn if you buy 1 skein of, let's say, red and 1 skein of blue. So what that is telling you is you will need no more than 400 yards of color 1 or color A and no more than 400 yards of color B. But it is impossible to tell you necessarily exactly how many yards were used in size 1, size 2, and size 3 because no one has knitted up completely and then unraveled it and measured out the yardage to say, well, it's exactly, 150 yards in size 1, exactly 200 yards in size 2, and exactly 300 yards in size 3. No one has done that. It would be highly unlikely for people to have done that. First of all, you'd be ripping out your samples. And it's just not going to be done. So when you're given yardage in terms of skeins in a pattern, it's telling you that you will need no more than what comes in a skein. And since you generally can't buy yarn in less than a skein's worth, you have to buy 1 skein. But you can buy any 1 skein along the price spectrum. So, do you have to buy the yarn in the pattern? I'll tell you the truth that I've been fiber crafting since I was a little girl, and it never occurred to me that you could only, and that's my point of view because that's just my experience. It never occurred to me that anyone was only thinking they had to use the yarn in the pattern. Before the internet made so many patterns so much more available, you got patterns out of books, you got patterns in pamphlets at the store, and I'm not talking about like fancy yarn stores. I'm talking about local 5 and dimes, that sort of thing. when I was growing up, if the yarn could not be obtained at Woolworth, the yarn could not be obtained. That was just where you got yarn. And for some people, it's Sears. Some people, it's Walmart. Whatever the store was that was close to you was where you got your yarn. That's it. Uh, when I was a teenager in the neighborhood I lived in, there was a place called Save-A-Thon, and they had a limited selection of craft supplies. Well, limited. They had all sorts of. It was like sort of a place, like a very scaled down Michaels. So they had supplies for all sorts of different crafts, but just the basics. Um, so it's not my experience to say, okay, this thing was made in I don't know, La Bien Amie, and I have to get La Bien Amie in order to make it. No, um, that was just not a thing. It's just like so. My experience has been to look at the picture of the item, see how it lays on the on the model or the mannequin. I get upset when I don't have a good picture of all the angles, but that's my pet peeve. And then look at the details about the yarn that they used and try to find yarn where I can match the fiber content or at least approximate it. Um, you know, I have a category called good acrylic, and one of my favorite acrylic yarns is Plymouth Encore. I recommend that to people who come into my shop to make blankets for babies, to make children's clothes, because, in my personal opinion, it's a perfect yarn for kids. They wear their stuff hard, they run around and play. You want something that can be tossed into the washing machine and the dryer, because if it becomes the blanket you made becomes that child's favorite blanket, that parent is going to have the devil of a time getting it away from them to wash it and give it back to them in a timely fashion. So, and also children grow. So it doesn't really pay to get a yarn that's hard to care for or harder to care for than people are used to. Um, that's super expensive because this kid might wear this object for about a year. Children grow on you. So, okay, I'm losing my point now. But what I'm saying is, yes, there are acrylic yarns you can substitute. Look at the weight. That's going to give you the key. You want to see about the same number of yards. Yeah, I'm sorry if I seem to have just lunged at the screen. My screen went black for a second. I wanted to make sure I was still recording. You want to make sure that there are about the same number of yards to the gram. That's going to give you your first thing. That's my little summary there. Then you want to check the gauge and see if the gauges are similar. And you can do this all before you swatch. And if the yardage to the gram is the same or very similar, and the gauge is the same or very similar, and it's a similar type of fiber. So even if it's not superwash merino, let's just say it's wool, or it's a wool and acrylic blend, that will also work. Or if it's a straight up acrylic but the weight matches. Now, the only thing that's going to be different if you go straight acrylic is that it won't breathe the way wool or one of the natural fibers will, but that's a whole nother conversation. It will probably still work for your project. So, what is the final step? Once you've gotten through those two gates, you're pretty sure now that it's going to be a fairly close match. Now you're ready to swatch. And I would strongly recommend swatching, because then even if you do that 4-inch swatch, even if all you do is that 4-inch swatch that they recommend on the ball band, you're going to see exactly what the fabric is going to look like. You can compare the fabric that you got to the fabric in the picture. Or if you're kind of gonzo, like I have friends and family members who do not swatch. You can just go for it from there. But you will be much closer to uh, the yarn that they used in the pattern than not by just following those procedures before you go. Also, if you want a more in-depth review of this information, you can check out Kate Atherley's blog because she has a blog post all about yarn substitution. That's a really good post. I will put a link to it in the description bar. Anyway, good luck and happy knitting or crochet. So, to continue with shop news, we've also been building our very own kits. I have them up in the shop already online. They are on sale, no coupon code needed. This is the Venus shawl. Look at that. That is one of our crochet kits. Yes, crocheters, we are here for you. And this is the snowcat cardigan. Now, when I was thinking about putting kits together, the first thing that came to mind was, I don't want to have packaging that is just going to add more plastic. So after a lot of soul searching and actual online searching for different kind of packaging ideas, we decided to go with these bags. They're sturdy. They hold all the yarn that we do. Like, this is a very large gauge sweater in big fluffy yarn, and all the yarn that's needed for the sweater is in this bag. So the phone ringing probably got captured on the video. So yeah, I'm at the store. The phone's gonna ring sometimes. We're just gonna go with it. What I was saying though is that I like the paper bag packaging. It will hold whatever amount of yarn we need it to hold. I do stick a printed label on it, but it's not a glossy label. So it will pretty much break down eventually. And it's just a paper grocery bag that you can actually tear off the section with the label and compost it. So on the front of the package, we have a nice big picture of the item with the name of the project and the name of the designer. Our cute little logo in the corner. That's sweet. And on the back, we tell you exactly what's in the kit and what supplies you will need in addition. And we provide 2 other views of the item. This one is actually the Stargazer. No, I'm sorry, the Venus shawl. I'm still stuck on Stargazer because I just finished that kit. And it's the same thing. What you'll get, what you might still need to finish a project, and you are good to go. So let me know how you feel about packaging for kits and other objects that you might buy. Does extra plastic bother you? Do you want to see more recyclable or reusable packaging? I'd like to know because I'm going to be packaging kits going forward, and I will incorporate that into my thinking. Well, I think that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you again in 2 weeks. I'll be putting out a podcast every Monday, bi-weekly. Does that mean every 2 weeks, or does that mean twice a week? Well, I mean every 2 weeks. If you guys have any thoughts about how to substitute yarn or you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments. If you have a process that you already use that works for you for when you want to substitute yarns, please share the knowledge, okay? I'd love to hear about it, and let me know what you think about the different steps that you can use to ensure that you make a good substitution. Anyway, have a great week. Bye bye.